Welcome to Dramatic Pause, a Rose Theater podcast. On today's episode, we'll be talking with Devon, the props mistress at the Rose Theater. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Dramatic Pause, a Rose Theater podcast. We are super excited today because we have Devon on with us. She is the props mistress here at the Rose, and she's going to give us some information about what it's like to be doing that job. So welcome, Devon. Do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little about yourself here.
Sure. Hi, thanks for having me today. My name, like Mel said, I'm Devon, and this is my 5th season here at the Rose Theater. I actually started in the middle of my first season, and that was in 2016-2017 season. And just in the middle of the season, they had an opening, and they brought me in, and it was awesome. Love at first sight with the theater. I'm actually from Nebraska, so it was great to be able to be back home near my family and find a job in my field and get to work here. And I love children's theater. I did some specialization with children's theater when I was an undergrad, and so it was good to finally hone those skills that I had been working so hard on all those years into working here at a children's theater. So thank you for having me today.
That is awesome. Yes, no, we love having some people on the show that have really unique and interesting jobs that people maybe don't think about when they're thinking about theater in general. And so, when we're talking about props, I know there's kind of a difference between like prop pieces and set pieces. And what's the difference? How do you decide what gets built, as a set versus what is your prop world?
So generally, the indicator of whether or not it's a prop piece is it manipulated and moved around by the actor? If it is, and solely by the actor, then usually it's a prop piece. There's a lot of gray area always. Like there's some things that like what we call soft props. Those are things like purses or canes, handbags, eyeglasses. Some of those things are taken care of by costumes. So usually you got to talk with your costumer in the prop department to make sure that they are getting the things that they need to be able to design. So that way, their ensembles for the costumes look correct and they all match nicely. And then there's also some very large things, which maybe the actors might move around, like large scenic pieces. But generally, if it's like over the size of like a couch, usually then it's ran or built by scenery, and then you would have to talk with them to make sure that you're not stepping on anybody's toes and they all look the same. Oftentimes our scenic designer will even design some of the set dressing props that I take care of for our shows, and so it's really important to have good communication with all those other departments. But generally speaking, if it's manipulated by the actors, then it is a prop piece.
Awesome. That's a really great, easy kind of thing to think about. So when our people are looking at the stage, watching a show, they can be thinking about that's probably a prop versus anything else. So that's really cool. And so, when you guys are working on a show, we talked with Zach kind of about his process and with costumes. And one of the first things that we kind of talked about with him was how do you go from having a script where you're just reading the show and kind of going through everything to having the props? What is that process from when you look at that script very first day to now an actor's got that prop on stage? What is that like for you?
So of course, like with any design area, your first step is to read that script, and you're going to read the script over and over again to make sure that all of the things that they need to have and how they're being used and who's using them. That's all really important information to have. So I start off by reading the script, and then what I do is I make what's called a prop list. And on that prop list, I list things like what is the prop, and then like a description, especially if there's a description given in the script of what that prop should look like. And I also list the page number so that way I can easily find it if I need to refer back to that information. Mm-hmm. And then I have a couple more sections where I list, is it a prop or a set dressing? So since I take care of both, it's important that I delineate on my list which is which. And then I also have a section for notes. And so I fill out this prop list, and I may even do some research before we go to our first meeting. So that way I have a general idea of what, when I read the script, what I was envisioning and where I think it was going. And then after that, we do a set of design meetings. Here at the Rose, we usually do about 4 of those. And at each design meeting, we're given an opportunity to not only listen to the ideas and concept and information provided by the director, but we can also ask them questions to make sure that we're going in the right direction and everybody's ideas are cohesive and married together well. And so it's important that we have open communication in those meetings, because it really helps to facilitate the show to meet not only the needs of the theater and the show itself, but also then the ideas and visualization that the director has. And usually, like I said, we do 4 of those. And between each one, I will also have extra conversations with the director. So usually via email, sometimes phone calls. And I'll also have these kind of little short meetings with our scenic designer, who is usually an out of house person here at the Rose. We contract those people in. And so it's important that you have good communicative skills when you're a props person, because you're talking with people in all the different areas to make sure that you're meeting the needs of everything that needs to be done for the show. So you go through that process, and by the time you get to the 4th meeting, hopefully you have everything kind of solidified and you have a good collection of research images and research information that you need in order to build or buy or make all of these things. And then from there, we usually have a period of like 3 or 4 weeks in between before we'll have another meeting. And during that time period of the process, I would then do my like pulling from stock if I have anything that's available. And then I would purchase the items that I needed or supplies that I needed to build them. And I would kind of start on that building process. And then we have what's called a production meeting. And that's kind of like after all the designs are in place, but sometimes there's still like some questions and we need to like cover a few other things before that show is ready to actually be on its feet. So we have this thing called a production meeting when you can ask all of those questions and get together and talk about like, this is the stuff that I found. Is that what you think will work? Does it look right? And just because I've talked to the scenic designer and the director so much, they usually have a good idea, but it's good for everybody in the group to get to see, because with theater, it's always a team sport. So it's important that the lighting people know what colors and textures the objects I have on stage are. And it's important for costumes to know what they look like and how big they are, because one area ends up affecting all of the different areas.
Sure. No, that's awesome. I think that gives a really good idea of how you get going. Sounds like a lot of research, a lot of looking up different things, and a lot of communication in general.
Yeah.
And you did mention about making some stuff, but also buying some stuff. And how do you decide what you're going to do? Are you going to make it? Are you going to buy it? Is that mostly a style thing, or is it a budget thing, or how do you decide what to make versus what to buy?
Well, like most things, it has a whole lot of factors that you have to take into consideration. So at first I do have to look at my budget and see how much money I have, and then where do I need to allocate that money? Because there are going to be some things that I can't make. There are some objects that I've just not my wheelhouse to make, or they're better made if they're made by, a big manufacturer. And then also there's sometimes things that we can pull. Pulling is when we go down to our storage and we find objects that fit the needs of the show, and then we take them from storage and then use them in the show. And so sometimes we can do that with some of the objects. And then there are things that you just have to make because sometimes they just don't exist, or because you'll be able to make something that looks more appropriate for the show, or it could be that it needs to do something special. So that way you have to, adapt it. There's also sometimes when I will buy something and then adapt it. Like that's totally open. You can do that too. So I really have to look at all of those different circumstances. There's also a situation where sometimes we do things that are very stylized, so they're not realistic. And buying things that are stylized in a designer's conceptual sort of way is not always available. So, for example, we're getting ready to do Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus. As part of the show, we need a set of keys. And we went through the gambit of looking at the different keys. If you're familiar with Mo Willems' literature, you know that the pictures inside of his books have a very distinct drawing style. And that is not necessarily the style of what a realistic set of keys would look like, of course, but also a whole lot of different types of keys that are available on the market don't necessarily look like that. So, what we ended up doing was we purchased a set of keys that were the type that you would give to a baby as a chewing device, like a teething ring sort of key set.
Mhm.
And then I adapted those so that they looked more like the stylized version of the artwork from the book. And so that's something that we end up doing quite often because it's children's theater. And so we're often trying to make things look like books or movies or things of that nature.
Very cool. I love that example. How fun. And to look at something and think, I can make that to be what it needs to be. That's such a unique skill, too. So, when it comes to making props, what are some of the skills that would be the most important to have?
Oh, well, so props uses kind of all of the skills that you need in the other tech theater areas. When I went to undergrad, I actually was a general technical theater major. And so I had to learn all of the different areas, and it really was advantageous to me to then later become a props mistress. Um, Basic carpentry is a must. You have to be able to at least build some basic wagons and platform kind of structures. If you have better skills, you could even be building furniture and things of that nature. Um, so carpentry is really important. It's also really important that you can sew. I make a lot of puppets here, as well as a lot of small cloth items. And so sewing is really important. And you don't need a lot of like advanced sewing skills, but being able to do like a basic straight stitch and back stitch, zigzag on a sewing machine, knowing how to use a serger, and then just basic patterning, because a lot of the things that I make don't exist out in the world. And so it's really important that I'm able to make my own patterns to create those objects. Also, painting is really important, being able to use a glue gun and other adhesives. Also, just being imaginative is really important for this role because sometimes you're going to have to think outside the box. You're making things that don't really exist often, especially in children's theater. And you're also being asked to make things sometimes that are like really big or really small or not the standard size at all. So you have to be able to like think beyond all of that sort of stuff.
Sure, yeah. Thinking creatively, your example of the keys is a perfect example of seeing something and knowing how to manipulate that a little with some
Yeah.
creative thinking. I love that. Very cool. And so, what types of props or techniques are your favorite to work on?
I do really enjoy painting. I think that's a lot of fun. I love sewing. I find it very therapeutic. And so when we get to have a lot of sewing projects for something, it can be a lot of fun. Though sometimes when I'm having to sew very, very large items, it can be a bit tedious, but it always feels good when you get that project done, right? I also like to create things out of pool noodles. I think that that's always ends up being a lot of fun every time we have to do something with those. So I enjoy doing a lot of those sorts of things. Carpentry's not my favorite, but I can get it done.
Absolutely, yes. I love the note about pool noodles. I feel like we use more pool noodles at this theater for camps, and I've seen them in costumes and in props. Pool noodles, I
And
think, are
scenery too.
I
Yeah.
think they are children's theater's best friends. No,
We
that's
buy them by the case over here at the scene shop. So we
I love
definitely use
that.
a lot of them.
A random question: is there a pool noodle color that tends to be more common for you guys than not?
They have recently, like in the last couple of years, started making black pool noodles, and it
Oh,
has been wonderful. because it is like pool noodles don't take paint well. So when we have to adapt them to different colors, it can be very difficult. And usually what we end up doing is like sewing a sleeve that goes over the top of them because the paint just cracks off. No matter what we've used, we haven't been able to get that paint to stick. So having the ability to buy black and white ones now is a game changer. It really makes all the difference.
Awesome. Nice. Yeah, so you've been talking about you've been here for a couple of seasons now. Do you have a favorite show or a favorite prop that you've made since you've been here?
Wow. Well, maybe my favorite show to build props for was Harold and the Purple Crayon.
Mm.
I loved the look of that show. It was so beautiful and so much fun, very imaginative. And we got to make a lot of really cool stuff. Like I had this box of seeds that looked like one of those envelopes of seeds, and you could rip the top off. The top was Velcro. And so you could rip the top off and then shake the seeds out, and they would plant the seeds on the ground. It was so great. I really loved a lot of the stuff in that show.
I love that. That's awesome. I have been here a slightly shorter time than you, Devon, but I think
Mhm.
one of my favorite ones that sticks out always is the very recently from Penguin Problems, the Swedish fish. I
Oh,
loved the big Swedish fish, and then also the container that they came in. I think that was also an opening box, but it
yes.
was just such a fun prop, and it looked so good in those promo photos and all that jazz. So that's definitely one of my favorites that we've seen lately.
Well, and that Velcro removing top is such a great device. Like you can reuse that for a lot of different things, right? When I figured out how to do that, it became a game changer. It was wonderful.
Yeah, I love it. I just think that was such a great look. And then there was, just so many smaller props. It felt like the set for A Wonderful Life just was covered in exciting, small, interesting things. That was
Mm.
a show that I'm sure was kind of fun to work on. There was just a lot. And I know that we actually got to have some of the pictures while you were working be on our Facebook. So if anybody was following along during that time, we absolutely had some cool photos coming out. I remember the pill bottle specifically as one of our pictures that we had done.
Yeah, that I really like to do period shows. And so anytime that I get to do some research and recreate things that look like they're from another time period, I really enjoy that aspect of my job. And so Wonderful Life was a great piece for me to get to be able to do some of that kind of work on. And I got to make a lot of like forms, which I don't always get to do. But in that show, it was very helpful to get to have them. Like they were really helpful for the characters to have. And so that was a lot of fun to make. I made like, these old fashioned like checkbooks and stuff. And it was just very intriguing to me, all the information that I researched about them.
That's awesome. Very cool. So if a young person is listening to our podcast today and is kind of saying like, that sounds like a super awesome job, what should they be trying to kind of learn right now? What should they be doing right now? And then what kind of schooling should they be trying to look at when they get to be that age?
Yeah. So I would first of all suggest if you have a community theater in your community, it would be a really good idea to go down there and let them know that you're interested in prop making and prop artisanship and ask if there's any way that you could assist someone in making some props because that's a really good place to start. I used to volunteer all the time at my community theater through junior high and high school, and it was really helpful for me to hone my skills and also like discover what exactly I enjoyed the most about theater, like what areas I liked the best. And there's usually a lot of opportunity, and they are often in need of people to volunteer. Now, for my position, just so everyone's aware, you don't actually have to have a college degree to be a prop master. That's not a requirement. But instead, then you would need to be able to have enough experience to be hireable. So, depending on where you live, that might not be an option. But if you can, going to undergrad can be a very helpful way for you to get that necessary experience and learn a lot of skills. And they're going to teach you things outside of props too, which are going to be helpful to your life in the long run. So I would suggest trying an undergrad degree if you are so inclined to do that. I attended Nebraska Wesleyan University here in Nebraska, and it was great. They gave me a lot of helpful tips. And as I mentioned before, in order to be in their program at that time, you had to be a theater generalist, and then you would just do emphasis in different areas. And so I emphasized in technical theater, but I had to take the gambit of different courses. So I learned how to do kind of everything there was, both on stage and off. And that really helped me to be more hireable, especially when I was first out of college. It really helped me to be able to go on and work professionally because I was able to use whatever skills I had. And I've worked in lots of different areas. I've been a costumer, and I've been a TD, and I've been a scenic designer, and I've done lighting even. It's not my best area, but I can get the job done. So um, I think that can be very helpful to anybody who's trying to make a career in this area. I did end up also going to graduate school after that because I wanted to teach on a college level, which I did for quite a few years after grad school. But that wouldn't necessarily be a necessity if you want to just be a prop master for a company.
Sure, awesome. I think that's some really great information to anyone who's interested can kind of get their feet wet and figure out
Yeah.
if this is for them.
Yeah.
Well, Devon, I want to thank you so much for coming on and giving us just a little glimpse into what your world is like. And thank you so much for taking that time. And we look forward to seeing props on stage for many, many seasons to come, hopefully.
Yes. I can't wait for our next show to open too. It's going to be so cute.
Well, thank you again so much. And thanks everyone who joined us today. We hope to see you and join us again for our podcast very soon.
Thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye.